All right. Welcome back to week 6 of the college football DFS live stream. My name is Josh Chevalier. I'm at CFF Guys on Twitter. And man, I'm here with my boy, Matt Wispe. Matt, you want to introduce yourself a little bit? Tell them where they can find you on the social media channels.
I'm Matt Wispe. Pretty much the only social media I have is Twitter, X. It's always Twitter. At
Yep.
Wispe the Kid. Then yeah, I mean you can find me. I write for Fantasy Points. I do the midweek slate. I do some sports betting stuff for Action Network on the weekends, and then I usually have anywhere between like 6 and 10 picks I put out on Twitter on Saturday mornings, which until last week was profitable every week, and then last week was a disaster.
I think last week was a disaster for a lot of people. So
It's
not
all right.
just you for sure.
Yeah,
Well, man, go ahead. What were you gonna say, Matt?
nah, nothing significant. Just it was a week.
Yeah, it was definitely a week. Well, man, today is like one of those days it's going to check off a box for me of like things I've wanted to do in the industry. And today, like getting to talk with you and chat with you, man, I've listened to you, on different publications and different podcasts and always felt like, man, like you're super sharp. And so just a chance to get to work with you this year. Like I feel super honored to be able to do that. But then also, man, to share a mic with you, like this is going to be really fun. And so I'm super excited. Thanks for coming on and hanging out for a little bit.
Absolutely, it's a good time.
Yeah. Well, let's jump right into it. We got 12 games this week, right? With the bye weeks. I think um, DraftKings decided to go a little bit lighter on this slate. Last week they did the same thing, 12 games. And I love, like, usually we have to wait to get into the good games, but not this week. We have the Texas Oklahoma, the Red River rivalry is the first one up on the DraftKings slate this week. And so in that game, I believe we have a 60 total. I'm sure it's moved a little bit since I got this number. And then Texas is favored by 6.5. Man, the weather here in Texas is incredible right now. We're in the 60s, which we just haven't been there in forever. And so I think all the elements are lining up for this to be an awesome game. So, do you have any plays that you like from this game?
As weird as it sounds, this is kind of one of the games I'm not going super heavy on.
Yeah.
Even though I do expect there will be some scoring, I also think both of these defenses are maybe a little better than the than the country has realized. I actually
Hmm.
think Oklahoma's one of the better defenses in the country. So I think
Yeah.
I still probably. I mean, I'm probably in some. If I have a portfolio, I want a little bit of Quinn Ewers just because I think he's such a big slate breaker. And then, yeah, I mean, I think I kind of like AD Mitchell is probably the receiver I'd rather get rather than Worthy this week, but it's probably preference and it's mostly just based on his price.
Yeah. Man, I'm right there with you. I think, on the Oklahoma side of things, it's hard to touch anything here. This Texas defense has been awesome. But on the other side, one guy I will say that I'm intrigued by is Nick Anderson. I own a lot of Andrew Anthony and CFF. And every time I look at box scores, it's Nick Anderson breaking off like a 38-yard touchdown and just killing my hopes. And so, at 4.8K, he's a guy that's got some intrigue to me. They wrote him up on the 247 website this week in an article they did. And so, I think he's a guy that's coming on. He's trending in the right direction, but that's really only, a pump play from me, maybe a couple, uh, couple exposures to him. On the other side, though, man, Quinn Ewers, like we've only seen him play in a few big games in his career, but he's done well, right? Like
Hundred
Alabama for
percent.
the one quarter he played, right? And then Oklahoma last year, his like biggest game of the year, and then Alabama this year. So we know this guy shows up in big moments, and I think you're right, man. He's got the fact that I think he broke off like a 30-yard touchdown last week against Kansas. I mean, if he's going to start running the ball, I
Yeah.
mean, this guy's just like super legit. You know that Sark's going to come prepared with the game script and calling plays. And so I'm with you, man. Him and AD Mitchell, they seem to have a connection that like maybe the whole like him missing Xavier Worthy on deep passes, maybe they just don't have the chemistry in that. And maybe
Yeah.
AD Mitchell is ultimately the guy. I don't know. But And I think Jonathan Brooks has been so hot over the last few weeks at 6.7K. He'll be hard to get to on this slate, but I do think he is viable if you can get there, based on
Yeah.
other guys that you might play.
I think my only worry about Brooks is just that like this Oklahoma run defense has been through whatever 5 weeks or whatever. They've been really stout. They have a on defense. They have a 33.3% stuff rate. Their
Yeah.
defensive line is only allowing 2.23 line yards per attempt. Like if Brooks is going to do something, he's going to have to kind of just make stuff happen. And I don't know that I want a lot of exposure to him. If I'm doing it,
Yeah.
it's a volume play, so I'm probably even just limiting it to cash games.
Yeah.
And even then,
No,
he's
that's
probably not high owned.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. Yeah, I mean, I think even on this slate, you're talking about a guy that's going to have maybe a fifth, 20% of people are going to have, projected ownership, which actually is higher than I thought it would be after just looking at it. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good call. It's definitely going to have to be something that he's working for those yards if he gets it. It might even be a game script thing for sure.
Hmm.
So, yeah, next game we have Missouri and LSU is coming to town, and this game just has the makings of a potential shootout. The way that Brady Cook's been, pardon the pun, but cooking over the last few weeks, and Jaden Daniels, man, I mean, he has been unbelievable as well. We got LSU with a 6.5 point favorites in this game. Again, all these games that we're going to talk about, they have good weather, so we don't even have to really factor in wind or anything like that. So, what plays do you have in LSU Missouri that you like?
I mean, I think there's two, and I think they're super chalky. It's Malik Neighbors and it's Luther Burden. LSU's pass defense is the worst. I'm sorry, is the third worst pass defense according to success rate on the entire slate. And they have the worst overall success rate allowed on the slate. I want pieces of this Missouri offense. I actually think getting a Cook and Burden pair is probably really valuable. And then, I mean, say all that, Jaden Daniels has been kind of tearing it up through this whole time. So I'm not gonna turn down definitely the most talented player in the game right now, which is Neighbors, and getting a fair bit of exposure to him. But I mean, we're projecting them both at really high ownership, so they're definitely not a way to get unique, but they may be a necessary part of lineups just to keep up.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, and I think Brian Thomas is right there too, right? Like with he'll probably have similar ownership percentage. I was surprised, some of this projected ownership has him quite a bit lower than Malik Neighbors, but that's just hard to believe for me because he's put up, I think, 25 fantasy points in every game but one. And when you get that type of consistency, that's just crazy, right? Like that type of floor um, is insane. You're talking about a Missouri defense, right? That you just, talked about beautifully. And like they're just not very good. They're giving up a lot of points to opposing wide receivers. So I think all of this plays very, very well on that side of things. Jaden Daniels, I mean, he's just been unbelievable. Then on the other side of this, Brady Cook, I talked to him last night on the props live stream. But LSU, man, they've allowed, I think they gave up 348 to Jordan Travis, 289 to KJ Jefferson, right? I mean, Dart just went off. And so they're just giving up a ton of passing yards to guys that, like, historically at least, haven't been the most prolific of passers. And you have Brady Cook here, and he's actually like improved quite a bit. I mean, I think what he's done over the last 3 weeks has been incredible. And I don't see that slowing down here. I don't know how you get away from Burden right now on this slate. I mean, I think you have to have them both cash GPP. And Brady Cook, we have him at 24.1 points, and he's 7.4K. So we have him hitting value here. And so yeah, I think both of these sides, like the passing game stacks, are probably going to be pretty popular, I imagine, on this slate. Anything else you want to add, Matt?
No, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with LSU. Their secondary, we knew it coming to the year; it was going to be a concern. Florida State made it look like it was the worst secondary in the country at times, and I mean, if with Cook seemingly firing on all cylinders and a talent out there like Burden, it's easy. It's a simple plug and play.
Yeah, yeah, and, and I just saw that Deuce Chestnut is actually, I think, left the team for a while, and so that gives him 5, total scholarship DBs and an already depleted
I mean, Denver
secondary.
Harris is actually going to play for them.
We'll
That's
see. I'll believe that when I see it for sure. So, all right, man, we got a game that I know you're interested in here. We got Maryland at Ohio State, and we have a total of 58 and a half. Ohio State is actually favored by 20. And yeah, what plays you got for this game?
so it pains me to say this, but I think you have to full fade Marvin Harrison between the fact that
Yeah.
teams are between the fact that teams are bracketing him and the fact that this week he has said that his ankle injury he suffered last game was actually more significant than the ankle injury played through last season. I don't think he'll be a decoy, but I don't think they're going to run him into the ground like you might normally expect from him volume wise. Um, I think that means getting a piece of is gonna get a heavy dose. Um, I think the guy that this season is probably paying off the best is Cade Stover at 4.6K. He's been probably their third most viable receiving weapon right now. They've been targeting him a fair bit, as much if not more than Julian Fleming on most games. And if this is a game where they're going to try and run the ball at all, which I do anticipate they will, um, that means that you're going to have a lot of situations where Cade Stover's on the field, which gives just more and more opportunities for him to get those passes. So I really like Cade Stover as a play in this one. And I mean, I think Travion Henderson's always a pretty solid play just because you know what he can bring where it takes really it's one big play and he almost pays off his entire price.
Yeah. No, totally.
And it,
Yeah, go ahead.
and if you are going to play anybody from the Maryland side, I think it's Henby or bust. Um,
Mhm.
the run defense is a little bit porous for Ohio State, just as we've seen from the Notre Dame game. Although I don't think Maryland's offensive line is really at that same level. I don't think they'll have the same level of push. But at the same time, the secondary for Ohio State is its strength. So I mean, maybe you go after a Corey Dykes, but even then, I think it's Hemby or bust. Hemby or bust for me.
Yeah, no, I like that call. Yeah, it's pretty crazy how many targets Stover is getting a game. I mean, I think it's like 5.8 targets per game that he's getting, and he's getting, getting chunk plays on those targets too. So yeah, he's a guy, at 4.6K, if you want some cheap exposure to this game, and a guy that's probably not going to be very highly owned on this slate. I mean, Stover's a great piece to get a little bit of relief in salary, which ultimately we may not need as much as we did before the Tez Walker news came out on this slate, but so good nonetheless. Next game, man, we got is Rutgers, Wisconsin, and Rutgers is coming to Wisconsin. The over under is 44.5. Wisconsin's favored by 14. You have any Big Ten inside sources for us, or any plays that you love in this game?
No, it's. I don't think there's anything like you can make plays in this one. I think if you're going to attack the from the Wisconsin side, I think it's Braylon Allen. Now that with Malusi out for the year, Allen's getting a pretty healthy dose of work. You're going up against Rutgers' weakness of the defense, which is their rush defense is allows a 42% success rate, which is the sixth highest on this slate. So if you're going to do that, I'd rather attack them through the run game. So probably Allen, but he's always pricey, so I'm not necessarily running to put him into my lineups. But cash games, I think he's probably a safe option because you know what kind of volume you're getting, and I think the offense is still runs through them more than it does Mordecai.
Yeah. And I think you make great points with Allen. It's just like, how do you get there? right? If you're going
It's 8.4K.
8.5,
Yeah,
yeah, 8.4K, then it's just like it's just hard to build a lineup around that at the wide receiver position unless you're punting some of these guys that we've already talked about. But yeah, I'm totally with you, man. I mean, Braylon Allen is the play of this game. Not much else for me. All right. UCLA, Washington State. I think this is a great game, right? Washington State is traveling to UCLA. We got a 60-point total. UCLA is favored by 3, which is kind of surprising to me, to be honest. I know it's at UCLA, but I don't think they should be favored. I think Washington
absolutely
State is a
not.
much better team.
I'm actually
So if you're
curious
a
now.
bet, I
I'm
and
checking
maybe
quickly if where I want to bet it.
yeah, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I wrote it down wrong, but that's what I
Mhm.
have. So is
You have it
that
right. It's
right?
just that's the right line. It's just a weird line, and I think I will
Uh
probably
huh.
be on. I'll probably have some Washington State on Saturday morning.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is one if you bet games, this is one that you should definitely be getting some pieces of. Definitely think that Washington State can take them with the points, you know. So, but what you got, man? What you got as far as plays on this slate?
I mean, I like Josh. I like Josh Kelly a fair bit, particularly if
Yep.
you pair him up with Ward. Um, that offense is pretty dynamic, and I'm interested to see. Honestly, like I'll be honest, I was completely shocked when Washington State beat Oregon State. That was probably one of my favorite plays of the week was Oregon
Mm-hmm.
State to cover that game.
Mm-hmm.
What they showed me in that game was Cam Ward, all of the hype that got into last year or coming
Yep.
into last season, it's starting to come into fruition at this point. I,
Yep.
I like what I've seen from him. He's dynamic. He can make things happen, keep plays alive long enough to just do things. So I, realistically, it's any wide receiver in that group. I think Kelly, Victor, and Williams all have some value, and it's kind of just if you find the one that you can fit. I probably like. I do still think I like Kelly the most, just because I like volume.
Yep. Yeah, if we knew that Victor was like 100% healthy from that ankle sprain, then I'd be all over that at 5.6K. But feels like if he is playing, he's probably more of a decoy this week. But I like that, man. Josh Kelly, he's the one that I had circled too. Kyle Williams is another one, at 5.4K. We haven't projected at 14.1 points this week, so it's almost value. But man, Cameron Ward, I know this UCLA defense is like potentially tough. I mean, they haven't really played anybody, to be honest. But Cameron Ward has hit 40 points 3 times this year, 3 out of 4
Yeah,
games. And he did it against Oregon State, right? And I think if you're doing it against Oregon State, you can do it against UCLA. He's 8.6K. And I think so many people are going to be on Jaden Daniels that Cameron Ward kind of gets forgotten a little bit. And like I'm seeing a projected like low single digits, right? And if that's the case, I mean, with the upside that he's got, like he could be a great tournament play, in my opinion. And a great way for us to differentiate ourselves, even in cash contests as well. So I'm loving Ward this week, and like you said, pairing him with Kelly, pairing him with Kyle Williams, like I think there's something there. Eventually, like we just need to see a little bit of hope from Dante Moore. Like just see him do it against somebody because I'm loving his price at like 6K. I'm like, eventually this dude's gonna hit, and we just got to figure out which week it is that he's gonna come on. But so far, Utah, Washington State are not the defenses that I want to challenge right now with
yeah.
Dante Moore. So I don't have anything on the UCLA side. Anything else on this game?
No, I think we're on the same mindset on this one.
Yeah. All right. Well, Clemson has Wake Forest coming to town, and that game we have a 51.5 um, point total, and then Clemson's favored by 21. Yeah, what you got for this game?
Not a lot. I mean, I think
Hmm.
it's full on fade wake for me, um, which is a weird feeling because it is typically one of those offenses you just want a piece
Yeah.
of. But for as maybe up and down as Clemson has looked, I think what we saw last week for Clemson when they just kind of handled their business. Um, their defense is still good. I mean, they still have a really high quality defense, and I don't really want to go against that side. From the Clemson side, nothing really special for me. Maybe I want to get a little bit of piece of. I like Antonio Williams as a player, so maybe get a little bit of him in there, and then maybe just maybe take some shots on some of the cheaper wide receivers on the slate with him. I do like Troy Stellato as a football player, and
Mhm.
4.8K is reasonable, but we're not projecting him out really to make that back. Of the players we're projecting pretty well, I guess Tyler Brown's the wide receiver that stands out. We have him projected at 16.8, which returns value on 5.3K. So I think that's a spot. And again, I actually think the play might just be if if you want to get unique at quarterback, I think Klubnik will be fairly unique. But
Yeah.
that's maybe the biggest play for me is if you're trying to put together something different, then maybe Clemson's a team to have a stack on.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is a Wake Forest defense that has been horrible against opposing wide receivers. They're giving up 20 plus to opposing wide receiver ones this year and going quite a bit over their season average. And so I love Tyler Brown this week. I do like, I've seen quite a bit of Clemson because I'm a Klubnik fan. And although he's struggling a bit, I do think he's different when Tyler Brown is in the game. Like Tyler Brown just gets open and like he was running wide open in that Syracuse game last week. It was crazy to see. I had quite a bit of exposure to him last week when he had 8 catches for 151 yards. And so I watched a lot of him and I do think he makes a difference. I'm curious to see with Antonio Williams back what that does to his, like, do they play both of them in the slot together and therefore they take out Brenningstool, or do they keep with like 11 personnel? Like, what are they going to do? It's going to be intriguing to me, to be honest, how Garrett Riley kind of schemes that up. But I do like Tyler Brown quite a bit this week. I like what you said about Klubnik. I wish the Wake Forest offensive line was better. Because if they were, I would, I don't know if you remember last year, but like Clemson struggled against that slow mesh. Like they got
Hmm.
killed by AT Perry. I think Jamal Banks is actually the one that just kept going after. Was it Nate Wiggins? I can't remember which DB it was last year, but like they just killed them. And I know Clemson won, but it was like 39-38 or some crazy high scoring game. But I just like when ODU is getting after Mitch Griffiths, we have problems.
Yeah,
So I can't trust Wake Forest anything there. I will say like Demon Claiborne at 3.3K and Wesley Grimes at 3.9K are cheaper punt plays that I think I'd have some intrigue with. And those are guys that I was actually gonna talk about quite a bit before our boy Tez Walker came in at 3K and is playing this week. So those are two guys, Demon Claiborne and Wesley Grimes. And I'm gonna put just a couple, like maybe one of my GPP lineups. I'm gonna throw one of each of them in there because they just have the potential to go off at their price point.
I agree.
Yeah. All right. Florida State, Virginia Tech. This is not a barn burner on paper necessarily. I mean, our total is 52.5. It's at Florida State. Um, Florida State's favored by 24, but I do think there's some intriguing plays, particularly I think on the Virginia Tech side. But you have anything for this game that you like at all?
I mean, Jaheim Bell is almost like a lineup mainstay for me. I think he's just
Yeah.
a unique enough player. Get him in there, and they figure out ways to utilize him at 4.3K. It's really easy one to slide into lineups. Um,
Yeah.
I always worry. I get like FOMO with Keon Coleman because there's just you never know what
Yeah.
he would do in a matchup that's favorable like this one. So probably want a little bit of exposure to him. Beyond that, on the Virginia Tech side, I'm higher than our projections on, and I'm gonna butcher his name, Bishul Tuten. Um,
Yeah.
I'm higher than our exposure or than our projections on him because Florida State is actually susceptible to the run. They don't let up
Mhm.
a ton from a raw perspective, but they're defensively they're among the bottom, I think, 5 on the slate in rushing success rate allowed. I'm lying about
Dang.
that apparently because it's not showing up on my list, but like they're middle of the pack on that one, and they allow a fair bit of like their stuff rate's pretty low. So I actually think he's a nice play at his price, but uh, there are also a fair bit of good running backs on this slate that I'm also not rushing to put him into my lineup. So,
Yeah.
but I'll
No,
have
that's
some
really good.
exposure.
Yeah. Yeah, to be honest, I'm really intrigued by Kyron Drones this week. Not because he's a good quarterback at all, but because he just rushes a ton. And look, like Thomas Castellanos, who he's been okay this year, right? Like he's done well. But he had 95 yards rushing and 300 yards passing against this Florida State defense. We saw Jaden Daniels do well against them week 1. He had quite a few rushing yards. And so I just think we've seen Florida State struggle at least a little bit against quarterbacks that can run the ball. And so I think Kyron Jones, like, again, is he a good quarterback? Is he going to make a huge difference in this game? Like, I don't think so. But I mean, he's a guy that even if he just gets what we project him at 16.4 points, like he's going to hit value. And he allows us to get a little cheaper here so that we can fit in Burden and Neighbors and Thomas in a lineup. And so I like him from that perspective of like saving salary and like seeing if I can't get something somewhere else. So if I'm not going Cook in a lineup, or if I'm not, I do have lineups right now where I'm going Cam Ward and I'm going Jaden Daniels and just trying to fade a little bit on other places. But if I'm not doing those, then Kyron Jones is a guy that I keep gravitating towards as a cheaper option here. Um, Even though I don't love him as a quarterback, but all he's got to do is
And
touchdown and 50 yards.
if they're behind, like if they're behind early and have to keep up, I mean, garbage time effort is a real thing. There's so
Yep.
hopefully he chucks the ball around a little bit for him.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see. All right, a game that we were talking about when we were coming on air, and we had some good conversations. So hopefully we can reproduce that here. Is North Carolina and Syracuse, and so Syracuse is coming to town. I believe this game is at 60.5 as far as the point total, and then UNC is favored by 8.5. And yeah, there's a guy that had a fight with the NCAA that won it this week. And so any plays for you this week on this in this game?
I'll let you talk about him. I'll let you do that
Okay.
run. I think if I'm attacking from the Syracuse side, I do like LaQuinn Allen at
Yep.
5.8K. Um, Even if he hits just close to a season total, he's returning value at his price. It's just for he's one of those easy running backs to get in there under 6K and against a North Carolina defense that is very beatable. It's bottom 4. It's 4th worst on the slate in rushing success rate allowed. They allow over 3.2, yeah, over 3.2 line yards per attempt for opposing lines. This isn't a defense that you need to avoid at all. So, I mean, Pitt put up 24 points against this defense. I would anticipate Syracuse will be a little bit more offensively successful than Pitt. So, I think there's some points to be had on the Syracuse side, and that's my first target on it is LaQuinn Allen.
Yeah. I mean, Rodney Hammond had 83 yards against this against this defense.
Yeah,
So if he can do it, and he's benched now currently as the starter for Pitt. So if he can do it, I think LaQuint Allen can do it as well. You got anything else on Syracuse or North Carolina?
I mean, I think there's maybe a this. It's an okay spot to put in Schrader. Just again, it's a
Mhm.
defense that's not all that
Yeah.
concerning. Um, so I think like he's a guy that you can find a few spots for in your lineup. He's a guy I'll have in a few.
Yeah. No, for sure. Yeah, and I think I'm not sure if LeQuint Allen will be the highest owned running back, but he'll be one of them, right? 5.7K is just such a sweet, or sorry, 5.8, such a sweet spot to be able to get him at, and he wins in so many ways. On the other side of things, Amarian Hampton at 5.7K to me, I mean, he had the one big game against App State, and then everything else has been pretty pedestrian as far as yards and efficiency. Um, but he does get a lot of touchdowns, and I think there's going to be uh, some some points scored in this game. I think um, UNC's projected to get 5 touchdowns in this game potentially, and if they do, I think Hampton gets 1 or 2 of those, and so I think you can hit value. We haven't projected at 16.6 points this week, and so that's just under value for Hampton, but he's a little bit different at 5.7K. So I'm not going to have a ton, but I'll have some exposure. And then Tez Walker, right? Tez Walker was freed this week from the NCAA. He's 3K. Now, I'm very confident that he's going to play. I spend too much time on Tar Heels 247 website and on their podcast. I mean, I listen to it quite a bit. I'm a big Amari and Hampton fan. And so I've just listened to a ton of their stuff over the last couple of years. And they're super credible. They have a lot of good inside information. And they're basically saying Tez Walker, he's going to play. He might not have like, a full slate of snaps, but he's going to play a lot. And he's been going against the DB1s in practice for UNC. He's been practicing with the team the whole time. He just hasn't been going with the ones. So I think it's pretty evident that they need an outside wide receiver to really take over there and to really be there. And so, yeah, I don't even need to say this much about him because he's gonna be like 70% owned and everybody's gonna have him. So I don't even
Yeah.
know why I just went into all that, but
I mean,
if you needed a reason to be convinced, then there you
it,
go.
it, if you're trying to get like creative, Tez Walker's not the spot to be
Right.
avoiding. Like it is a free spot coming into this season. We in the preseason we heard like, oh no, the offense it's going through Tez. It's going through Tez. He is the center point of the passing attack. He and Drake May, they've got this. And now he's free. I mean, he's min price.
Yeah.
Sometimes decisions are easy.
Yeah.
First lineup spot of your roster. Just type into the search bar so you don't have to scroll down that far. Tez
There you
Walker.
go. There you go. Love it. All right. Anything else from this game?
Nah, I think I'm good.
Yeah. All right. Man. All right. Alabama A&M. Alabama's coming to town facing A&M. Got a 47 point total for the game. Alabama's favored by 2.5. And Aggie fans are super excited, waiting outside of the stadium in anticipation of trying to knock off Bama, which look, the Aggies have played them tough for the last few years. So see if they can do it again. But you got any plays in this game?
Not a lot. It's another one. Like
Yeah.
Texas A&M's defense has been really good so far this year. Um, really, that one performance against Miami, I think, is what sticks out to everyone. Is like, oh man, this team might suck. Texas A&M's a really talented team, and
Yeah.
from a pure upset watch perspective, like this one's real for me. I think Alabama should be concerned because Alabama's strength is their defense. A&M strength is their defense. If there's not a lot of points, that's a lot of volatility from like the win loss perspective. So I'm not going to have a lot in this one. I think if I do make, if there's anyone I am really going after, it's probably, I mean, I like Aeneas Smith, versatile player. They find ways to use him. Um, I
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little bit worried to plug him in just because while I do think Max Johnson is just as talented as quarterback, not as not as talented. He's a fine fill-in for Wegman that you're not going to feel like there's a huge drop off. Um,
Yeah.
it's still going up against Alabama um, for his first start in whatever amount of time. So I yeah, I don't like a ton from this game. If I have to make a little bit, it's Aeneas Smith because he is in that like 5 point or he's 5.3K, which is a pretty reasonable price for a player that should get a fair bit of targets.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm right there with you, man. Yeah, there's not much in this game for me. I do think Le'Veon Moss in future weeks is a guy that we need to watch out for. He produced 18 points in consecutive games, but Alabama is too tough, I think, to run on for him. So um, we've had a couple comments here above. Eric said Victor's not expected to play. So Lincoln Victor, who we talked about earlier, yeah, I mentioned he had a high ankle sprain. Looks like he will be a game time decision, but even that, he'll probably be more decoy than anything else, which we talked about earlier. So, all right, the game of the slate right here, Iowa and Purdue. Just kidding. Uh, it's bad when I think Trey, our producer in the background, he sent out an article earlier about Iowa being the most predictable offense. I guess when they're under center, they run it 76% of the time. When they're in shotgun, they throw it 76% of the time. I mean, which is all the tropes about Iowa just in one or a couple sentences there. I love it. But over under 39, 2.5, favored Iowa. You have anything on this game? I'm kind of out on the whole thing, so I'll let you take it.
No. I mean, Iowa's defense is still pretty good. It's not quite up to the level that it's been in years past where they can completely salvage
Mm-hmm.
their offense being pitiful, but no. I mean, yeah, I'm not. I think this is this is a pure full fade game. I'm trying to talk myself into Deion Burks because I like him, but
Yeah.
even then, I'm not. There are other running backs at the same price point that I would rather put in my lineup. So no.
Yes. And for me, that player was Hudson Card. He's like a guy I want to talk myself into. I'm like, he can get there. No, he can't. And if he does, he's just getting there, right? It's nothing. It's not like Kyron Jones who has some
Yeah.
upside. So yeah, we'll fade that game, save our breath, and save your time. But we got another one here that's pretty intriguing to me. We have Kansas UCF. UCF's coming to town playing Kansas. And we have an over under of 65, which I think that's the highest on the slate. And Kansas is favored by 2 in this game. It's going down more as John Rice Plumlee is, I think, trending towards playing, and Jason Bean is probably in a quarterback, so Jalen Daniels
hmm
is probably out. But what you got? You got any plays on this one?
I mean, with Bean on there, I think he's made. I don't even want to say he's as good a passer as Jalen Daniels. I think from the passing game, he probably isn't going to cause a huge drop off for the Kansas attack. But
Hmm.
I probably wasn't attacking this Kansas team through the passing game. Devin Neal is sort of an easy play for me. UCF's one of the worst running teams, run defenses on this slate. 6.3K. We're projecting him around 18 points. Frankly, he's one of those guys that I think has slate breaking potential on this one. So if
Yeah.
all of a sudden he ends up with like a 30-point game, I really won't be shocked. So I do like him on this one. Beyond that, I mean, I don't love anyone on UCF this year. There's a lot of guys. Um, I guess I mean, yeah, I don't have enough thoughts that I want to like ramble on about RJ Harvey, but I think
Yeah.
there there are quite a few players. I think there's value on the UCF side in areas, but realistically for me, this one is I'm getting Devin Neal in every lineup I probably can.
Yeah. I think that's a good one. I thought Devin Neal would be lower owned because he's struggled the last couple weeks, right? And um, but yeah, I think he's gonna be decently owned, right? In the 20s, probably 20 percentage points. Um, but I don't know, man. I'm totally with you on Devin Neal. The other guy that I, am intrigued by, and it's in the same backfield as Daniel Highshaw. Not in a bunch of lineups, but in some GPPs as a guy that maybe he has some. Well, he has a tendency to break off some long runs and to get his points in bunches. So 4.7K. Man, maybe even double stack this because I think UCF is not going to be able to stop the run. I mean,
No,
DJ Giddens, right? A few weeks ago, 4 touchdowns. I think he had 60 fantasy points on this defense. And somebody, I read, I don't know if it was a Kansas message board or a Kansas article on 247, but they just talked about just UCF's depth on defense just doesn't seem to be there. They seem to really be able to give up a lot of rushing yards in the second half of games. And I think just coming up from G5 to P5, it's a transition, right?
Yeah.
And having to play that type of deal. And so Ashton Genty scored 30 plus against them. DJ Giddens, 65, 60 points. So yeah, Devin Neal, Daniel Highshot, I totally agree. Yeah, Bean's a little bit intriguing because he can run a little bit, um, but yeah, I wish we knew, right, that either Plumlee was going to play or McLean, and that was all that was going to happen, right? And they were fully healthy because I wouldn't mind trying to get some exposure to them because Kansas is a pretty bad defense against opposing quarterbacks, but it's just too questionable for me to play that.
And I think the play on that one, if you want to get exposure on the pass in the passing game, is probably through the wide receivers. At the point where like I think you're going to see probably relatively similar volume for Hudson Baker, maybe not Townsend, but like as you start to get those like top few guys in the UCF passing attack, um, I'll probably just go cheaper. So I'll probably just take Baker in some spots if I want to get it is
Yeah.
if it is still if we're still thinking this will be a high scoring game, which I do, and you do think that Kansas actually may get up early in this one because of
Hmm.
the UCF inability to stop the run. For me, it's probably Baker. Probably not
Yeah, I like
Baker or
that.
but it's probably Baker in this for that passing game for me.
Yep. Yeah, I like that a lot. Good call. All right. We got Florida and Vanderbilt. So Vanderbilt is coming to town here playing Florida in the Swamp. I believe we have a point total of 52. And so Florida is favored by 18. Maybe that'll come down a little bit if Trevor Etienne doesn't play, but probably not. But you got any plays in this game?
Now, hear me out. It's gonna sound
I'm hearing
crazy.
you.
I'm gonna play some Graham Mertz.
I, I like it. I like it. I love the call.
Um, this passing defense is bad for
Hmm.
Vanderbilt. They're actually the second worst passing defense when it comes to passing success rate allowed. Um, I want a little bit of exposure to the passing game, and I actually think that Mertz is probably a more unique way to get into lineups than just plugging in Pearsall. I do
Yeah.
think Pearsall is going to have a fair bit of ownership when it's all said and done. And I mean, and then yeah, getting Brown, and I might Eugene Wilson's price is probably a little bit too high to have him as like the stack that I want to go, but I do think
Mm.
that that has some
Yep.
potential. If he was like 4.5K, I probably would be all in on Eugene Wilson in this spot. But at 5K, I'll
Yeah.
have a little bit on that stack, but I don't think it would be like one that is the centerpiece of my portfolio.
Yeah. I like that a lot. Eugene Wilson, I talked about him a couple weeks ago coming back. Yeah, like because he had 6 catches for 40 yards before he got injured in that first
Hmm.
quarter a few weeks ago. And I was like, oh, he's coming back this week. I'm gonna stay away from this week, but like you should consider him. And then they don't even play him. But he's like listed as a starter in the depth chart this week. And man, yeah, he's a guy that could be a slate breaker, right? Like he could be worth having a piece or two. Um, a couple exposures to him in your lineups. I love the Mertz call because I think so many people are going to go after Montrell Johnson with the ETN news, especially if ETN's out. And that's not a
Hmm.
bad play for sure. But I think because of that, Mertz is going to be faded. And I can't believe we're talking about Mertz, but I mean, he's got Pearsall and they got a good connection. And I mean, what, 6.4? We
Yeah,
haven't projected at 21.4 points. I mean, that's a good call, man. I love it.
it's gonna feel like his debut game against Illinois all those
Uh-huh.
years back.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. I love that. Yeah. And I think of course, like we know Billy Napier, his tendency with running backs is to split carries no matter who he's got. He
Hmm.
just wants to do that. So like maybe Trayon Webb at 4.3K gets a
Yep.
little bit more run or something. So I think yeah, Montrell Johnson's gonna have a lot of ownership this week. So that that could pay off at 5.8, but if you want to get different than Graham Mertz, I love that call, man. I really love that. So, man, the chat is hopping over here. People, someone said, Dan Brown said, "Oh no, Mertz." Yeah, I feel that. But
I
so it's like
mean,
Kyron
there's a reason
Jones.
I prefaced it.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to say, look, like this isn't CFF, right? I think sometimes those of us like me and you, Matt, that play so much CFF, we can get caught up or even Devi, right? Like we can get caught up in the talent. And sometimes CFS is just about opportunity.
Hmm.
And so here we are. We have opportunity with Graham Mertz, potential opportunity. I think it harder, right, for Kyron Jones, but higher upside maybe. But those are a couple ways I think you can get different and cheap on this slate. Who, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but if you had like maybe 2, 3, 4 guys that you're like, these are the guys, my core pieces to my lineup this week after kind of talking through this and even looking at it before. Do you have any of those guys that you're looking at this week that like, yeah, I'm plugging and playing these guys?
I mean, I think Cam Ward is probably almost always is probably going to be like my top QB.
Yeah,
Um, and then probably Josh Kelly right there with him. I think getting that stack will probably be something that's pretty heavily featured for me. Um, Beyond that, I mean, I'll go with the obvious ones: Tez Walker, Luther Burden, and Matt
yeah,
and Neighbors or Thomas. One of those two
yeah,
getting those in there. That's really where my core is going to be. I'm going to build up through the wide receivers and then mix in add a little bit of variety in the running back area, and then a guy that I will definitely have uh, pretty close to across the board is, again, I mentioned him, Jaheim Bell. I think is just a guy that I want to get a lot of uh, exposure to.
yeah. No, I like that a lot. Yeah, the guys for me are guys like Brian Thomas. He's a guy that I'm just gonna have a lot of as the cheaper option there. Um, Jaden Daniels, of course, probably, but I'm gonna try to stick in some. I've already got a few Jaden Daniels and Cam Ward stacks, but I'm definitely coming off of the more I kind of look at this stuff and study it, the more I'm coming off of Daniels a little bit and moving on to Ward as just a differentiator, particularly in my GPP lineups. So I really, really like that call, man. Um, and of course, yeah, Tez Walker, LaQuint Allen is another one that I'm gonna have him.
I also forgot. I mean, a guy I'll probably have 30% of whatever lineups I end up getting in there. It's Cade Stover. Also, I kind of just it's been a while since we talked about that game. It was one of the first games we talked about, but
Yeah,
Cade again. I think Cade Stover is the play. Cade Stover is the play in that Ohio State game, and I like that.
yeah, no, yeah, that's really good. I'm glad you brought that back up. Yeah, Dan Brown said LaQuint Allen. He has Luther Burden, Malik Neighbors, and Tez Walker. That's a good core right there too. So I like that. Man, the chat has been awesome. This I think this is the most activity we've had in the chat. So that's been really fun. We'll have to continue to make this interactive. Matt, man, thanks for coming on
Absolutely.
and
Thanks for having me.
chatting up this slate, man. Yeah, this is one of those uh bucket list type things in this space that I've wanted to do. And so I appreciate you making some time. Good luck with uh
Everything
the
going on
stuff
around
you
my
have.
house. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. With things there. And hey, we'll be in the chat tomorrow. My son doesn't play baseball till 6 p.m. tomorrow night. So I got all morning just to talk about college football. So we'll be doing that in the Discord. Man, we have the best Discord out there. So I'm just feel honored that I get to be a part of this team and get to be a part of the Discord chat that goes on there. Really smart people in there that constantly help me make my lineups better. So thank you guys, and we will see you guys soon. Peace.